Here's the way buyers think, especially executive buyers. They don't think in terms of product-centric language, value proposition language, even smells like sales stench. So they sort of run for the hills from that. But here's the way they think. The 4 pillars of buyer thought: topics, trends, metrics, and outcomes. And when we begin to appeal to the buyers the way they think, we now are on track to incorporate hyper-personalized language without having to spend 30 seconds on someone's LinkedIn profile.
Welcome to the Modern Selling Podcast, where we help the entire sales community to create more sales conversations with today's modern buyer. This includes anyone from entrepreneurs and business owners to sales reps and sales leaders. Each episode, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you find, engage, connect, and nurture your relationships with your buyers. I'm Mario Martinez Jr., your host, and you're now listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Gong.io, the #1 conversion intelligence platform for sales. Gong helps you achieve revenue success, which means you win more deals, skyrocket rep performance, and gain critical market intelligence. Get powerful visibility into your customer conversations with Gong. Head over to Gong.io to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to get you on this edition of the podcast. And I've got with me a very freaking amazing, awesome guest, my man, Kraig Kleeman. And if you have not met Kraig, you would know him as soon as he walks into the room. He is the only guy wearing shades and sunglasses, but also known as the world's greatest cold caller. He's an author, a speaker, and I've got the privilege. We're going to be spending some time talking about the sales maturity model. I think that's what we're talking about today. And this is going to be an interesting discussion. You guys are going to want to tune into this, both leaders as well as reps, to take some time to peer into what it is that you got to do to be able to be more successful. So, Kraig, my man, welcome to the show, brother.
It is a pleasure to be here, Mario, and to all of your guests, I would like to say Mabuhay. I would like to say Gihi Gugmatika. I would like to say Kampai. I would like to say Tudubim, Tudubom. I've just greeted your audience, Mario, in about 5 different languages because I'm all over the world all the time. And those are 5 places I've been just in the last 6 or 8 months. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So what were the languages that you just did?
I did Filipino, I did Portuguese, I did Cebuano, I did Japanese, and I forgot what the other one was.
So, Kraig, you're a very well-known sales influencer and speaker. Of course, we've been friends for a long time. I got to ask you a question. It's going to be a personal question, and it's not the one that we usually ask about, tell us something nobody would know about you. It's something different. Do you mind if I get personal?
Go for it, man. I'm all good.
All right.
Bring it on, bro.
Bring it on. All right. This is not like super personal or anything. All the listeners are probably like, what is he going to ask? Here's what I'm going to ask people. I want to know the history behind the stunner shades. You're always wearing the sunglasses, even indoors. Talk to me about that.
That's a great question. I do get asked that question from time to time, Mario. You're not alone in that. Here's really what happened. I will tell you that I am personally a tremendous believer in the power of external perspectives. I believe in cultivating an insatiable appetite to learn. And having traveled the world as much as I have really learned that when other people have different views, other perspectives, it is absolutely a powerful way in a quest towards truth. So I began wearing my shades really as a reminder to myself to always greatly appreciate the power of external perspectives. Now, I have to be honest with you, over the course of time, I've actually developed a very mild medical condition Right now, if I don't wear them in regular nighttime light with TV on and the lights on and stuff, I actually get headaches. And my doctor said, well, Kraig, we can do a surgery, or you can just keep wearing sunglasses like I know you're going to do all the time. It started out entirely philosophical. It's become modestly medical. And now I just roll the way I roll, dude. That's the best answer I can give you.
I got it. Well, there's an actual real story behind this, other than you're trying to look amazing and great like you always do.
So I'm at Poe. Thank you very much. You're very kind.
I love it, man. So tell us something nobody would know about yourself, even if they looked at your social profiles. Well, give me something juicy, man. We've had everything from something as boring as I got a couple kids to people have heard this one. They had an extra appendage. So tell me something, man. What do you got for me?
This is kind of new, and a lot of people probably don't know this, but within the last year, I've gotten engaged, and I'll be getting married sometime early next spring. And I'm really enthused about that. And what a joy to have kind of gone through the transformation of what was going on in my brain and having fun in life and yucking it up a little bit and then meeting someone I was wildly crazy about. So I'm engaged and I'm getting married pretty soon, Mario, and I'm real proud about that.
Congratulations on that, man. That's an awesome story to hear. And who would have thought that Kraig was settling down and put his roots somewhere? That's good, man. That's good.
Thank you very much. Just bought a new condo and she'll be moving over here pretty soon. And it's a real exciting time. Thank you for mentioning it.
For those of you that can't see, we're actually live. I can actually see right outside of Kraig's window on his condo. And you're on like whatever it is, the 50-something floor of whatever building it is. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful view of Chicago, actually.
Hey, come on over. You're going to come over and be on my set one of these days pretty soon, aren't you?
I got you. Yeah,
on Kraig Kleeman TV?
I know you made the invitation. It's Kraig Kleeman TV, right?
That's it.
I'd love to. Absolutely.
Awesome.
So let's get into some meat, man. Let's get into some good conversation here around the sales maturity model. First off, for our listeners, we've got sales leaders, we've got marketing leaders, we've got salespeople. Talk a little bit about what do you mean by the sales maturity model? And I know this is a topic that many have talked about, but I'm very curious about your definition, what it means. So let's kind of tee that up and then we'll drill down additional questions, really to help sellers and sales leaders prepare for the future and prepare their year out.
Mario, first, let me just say that I'm so thankful that over the last 12 years, I've had the privilege of working with dozens and dozens and dozens of companies all across the world. And that, of course, has included a lot of documentation, a lot of observation, and collating all of that and documenting all of that very tightly has been something I've valued greatly. And over the course of having dealt with companies, some that are kind of early stage startups, some that are very, very mature. Like, for example, when I met Big Machines, they were quite mature, but still wanted to get to that level of valuation to sell to Oracle for $360 million. And we helped them mature their sales organization. And a variety of companies that I could mention like that. But we've really identified 5 or 6 really key areas. Whether it's a team that's Series B, Series C, or whether it's a large global 2000 company that last year I spent 10 man weeks with a company that focused on SaaS and the legal marketplace, 18,000 employees. Really, the truth is all companies to some degree struggle with very, very similar things. And that is learning to mature their sales organization to a place of optimum results. So in answer to the question, the vast experience for which I'm privileged and humbled to have experienced, having documented it along the way, has now created a model that allows any sales leader and any sales frontline person to begin to assess their organization, themselves, begin to track that and benchmark that against very, very clear benchmarks and make improvements from, let's say, a beginning step to all the other steps, finally to a place of advancing at full maturity. That's kind of the umbrella kind of phrase, Mario.
Obviously, you're a seller yourself. You actually got the title, the world's greatest cold caller, which I'm curious, how did you get that title?
Thank you for asking me that question, Mario. People do ask me that from time to time. What happened was early in my consulting career, when I began working with companies, we got these amazing outcomes. And back then, 12 years ago, the majority of my practice was centered around cold calling. Now that's one of about 5 or 6 different places that in an omni-touch, 13-touch, omni-channel program, we've now got to touch our sellers everywhere they are. But when my practice got started, it was mostly rooted in cold calling. And quite frankly, my entire practice is rooted in the science of language and understand kind of an English language nerd, Mario, and understanding how to apply language hermeneutically, understanding syntactical linguistics, and being able to understand the power of that, apply it to language in the form of persuasion to the profession of sales so as to get outcomes has really been the heart and soul of Kraig Kleeman and everything I've done. So back to your original question, well, I started doing this client consulting arrangement and we got phenomenal outcomes. My clients started calling me the world's greatest cold caller. And I thought, hey, that's a great one. So I made it my moniker on LinkedIn. I put it on some digital assets. And Mario, I have to be honest with you, I don't know if I'm the world's greatest cold caller, but I guess I've applied for that job by going out there on social media with it.
I love it. There you go. It's all about the branding, right?
I suppose it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you used a term that I'm not even sure if I even know what it means. So your vocabulary and your maturity is much greater than mine. I love this one, and I'm gonna have to look this one up. I'm gonna have to figure out how to put it into a sentence. You said syntactical linguistics.
Yes, I did.
That's pretty good. I like that word. Now say that 10 times fast. Syntactical linguistics.
Yeah. I probably could because I use it so often. When I lecture, I always talk about syntactical linguistics, which usually translates into helping my clients understand how to communicate hermeneutically. When they understand how to make hermeneutic phrases that all deal with context and text and apply it in such a way where it creates powerful enticement, that's where the magic begins to happen. So I can probably say syntactical linguistics 10 times in a row, bro.
I love it. I love it, man. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about the sales maturity model, and this is obviously based upon experience. This is based upon looking at many different customers' businesses and looking at these 6 levels, or was it 6 steps, I think you said, right, to the sales maturity model. So talk about what are the 6 levels of organizational sales maturity and why do I care about that?
Great question. In fact, if you don't mind, I'm just going to answer the question just a little bit differently.
Sure.
And I'm going to talk about 4 or 5 key areas or buckets of topics that really need to be examined very, very thoroughly for a sales organization to mature in the process across the model. The first one I know you'll be familiar with, and I'll bet a lot of your viewers will be familiar with. I won't spend a lot of time with it, but data integrity, of course, is where it all starts. We can create the greatest cold calling scripts. We can create the most highest performing email scripts in the world that get amazing responses. We can create the best social media touches in the world that are relevant to the way buyers think and get all kinds of great responses. But if we're doing all of that with ineffective data or data that hasn't been cleansed, one of the first things I do, Mario, when I meet a client is I stress test their database. Sometimes it's only 30 or 40% accurate. And how much money is being wasted when it comes to leveraging wages with excellence when you've got an SDR team or an appointment setting team whose job it is to win meetings and hand them off to a revenue kind of deal doer person. How much are we losing when that data is not valid, when it hasn't been verified properly? So my benchmark is a team that's at its highest level of performance, or at least has a chance to be at its highest level of performance when the data integrity is 90% accurate and 90% valid. Anything short of that compromises the results that we can potentially get. So data integrity, which I think your audience is probably pretty familiar with, that would be first base in this model.
Okay.
You want me to keep going, Mario? Do you have a question about that?
No, it makes sense. Absolutely. Bad data equals bad decision making.
Bingo. I'm going to steal that one from you, bro. I like that.
Take it, man.
Okay, yes, sir. I'll cite you, I promise. The second thing that I'd like to mention is this whole notion of load balancing. And what I mean by that is the number of SDRs or appointment setters. SDR is kind of the trendy term, but the number of appointment setters to closers. Let's just use that vernacular since not everybody uses the same vernacular these days. So if you talk to a lot of thought leaders out there, Mario, hey, what's the best load balance situation of setters to closers? What I find they'll often say is 1-to-1, maybe 2-to-1, maybe 1-to-2. And what I've found is that those are very, very often false assumptions. The answer is fanatical control group testing. I have one group, Mario, that I work with right now. I'll mention you their name privately. I'm kind of gagged. I can't mention their name publicly. But we are now in a scenario, I've worked with them year over year for almost 7 years now, where we have on average 6 setters to 1 closer. And our closers do 12 demos every day, 30 minutes at a crack. They won't let the demo go beyond 28 and a half minutes because they got to run to the restroom once in a while. They're actually happy when an appointment gets canceled, not from a pocketbook perspective, but just so they can get a break. So we are loading up this team of call takers, this team of demo doers, where they average roughly, this is not rough, this is what they average, 12 meetings per day. Wow. And that's because we've gone fanatical in our testing on a variety of levels, but in particular as it relates to the load balancing of appointment setters to closers. And I'd like to say that when I met that company 7 years ago, there was no valuation. Since then, there have been 2 recaps. We're about to do a third at a valuation of just under $500 million. The company has gone from nothing to 60 people in that organization, in the sales organization, more than 60, but roughly 50 people that do appointment setting and data validation, 5 closers, 12 appointments a day. In fact, I remember when we met that group, Mario, their average from demo to close, the average elapsed time was 6 months. We now have it down to 27 days. And we have the valuation that I mentioned earlier, in part because of a fanatical commitment to control group testing in terms of load balancing setters to closers.
Interesting. Well, let me let you go through those 4 basic elements you were talking about there. And then I'm going to come back to this load balancing concept of, and I think what I heard you say was a 4-to-1 ratio, 4 appointment setters to 1 closer. Is that right?
I think in this particular group that I just mentioned, it's about 6-to-1. They sell a few different products. Some might be 4-to-1, some might be 6-to-1, probably never less than 3 or 4-to-1. But let me disclaim that by saying not everybody's the same. 1-to-1 can work. It begs other questions like TAM, total addressable market, CAC, customer acquisition cost. It really begs a lot of other questions. But as we look at the total addressable market, reverse back our way into it and look at the capacity of our deal doers, the key is we don't want to just go in with some preconceived notion. We want to fanatically test, abandon what doesn't work and double down what does work. Sorry, I didn't mean to elongate on that for you, but I wanted to give you some more descriptor language on that.
Okay. That was number 2. What was the 3rd and 4th item that you mentioned?
Content and messaging.
My favorite topic.
Probably one of your favorite topics. We'll have a good conversation about this one. Mario, when I work with companies, what I would recommend with any group, whether I work with them or not, is that when it comes to the SDR function, the appointment setting function, and sometimes that's a standalone function. Sometimes sellers do hunt and farm. I recognize that. But what I'd like to advise is that all content be pre-created. We don't want the SDR to have to think about any of the content at any level, whether that's a cold call. And of course, when you make a cold call, you intersect in a variety of areas. You intersect with voicemail, you intersect with switchboard operators, you intersect with executive assistants, gatekeepers, you intersect with the target buyers themselves. When it comes to email, when it comes to social touches, when it comes to every single area for which we are going to create outreach to our prospects, our target buyers. I prefer that SDRs have zero input into the content, but all forms of content are pre-created, usually in about a 13-touch campaign over 30 or 45 days that touches the buyer every single place they hang out. Some people on social media, LinkedIn is quite popular. I had one group I worked with last year. They sold SaaS solutions to 1 to 2 man attorney firms. I had no idea, but those guys hung out on their Facebook pages. But when we began to touch them on their Facebook pages with relevant messages, usually incorporating video, started winning meetings, started quadrupling the number of meetings that we were getting. I guess it's kind of a long, we could go into this for all day. I like to recommend that all content be pre-created, and the SDR's job is now task adherence, not trying to think about what am I going to do today? What maybe should I send to this guy? What should I send to that guy? No. Every point of convergence is pre-created, and that's where sales engagement platforms are powerful. And when we start moving in volume, they can organize all the different touches that are happening over the course of that 13-touch, 45-day campaign.
There's no doubt in my mind that the right thing to do in terms of engaging with the client is to be in all the areas that a buyer is at. You referenced earlier the omni-channel approach to prospecting. 100% agree with you that we should have pre-scripted messaging for our sales teams, right? SDR and account executives. We should have content that maps to the sales process at the awareness phase, consideration phase, and the purchasing phase. We should have materials that they can engage with at these different elements. We should have pre-canned messages for outreach, those types of things, right? Those are all the things that we do when we are teaching and or engaging a client through social and or video. So I'm 100% with you with a big but. I'm talking about a big butt. That actually came out funny.
Stand up and show it, bro.
Let me show you the butt.
Yes, kidding.
So the big butt is we have gotten into a situation now where salespeople have become so pre-scripted that they actually have forgotten about the hyper personalization that's required to engage with a buyer today and to capture that buyer's attention. And I think that's one of the big challenges that we see, especially as a recipient, as a CEO of Vengreso, as a recipient of content and information. You can clearly tell that an SDR or an individual who's making outreach has not looked me up. I'm all over social media. You can clearly tell, and the questions that they're asking, you clearly see they have no clue about my business. That's one of the big challenges I see. And I believe it's a pandemic that's happening in the sales industry, in our space, that sellers have not migrated to the point where they can take the pre-scripted content that you just talked about and learn to apply it on a hyper-personalization level, which means not as much volume, but more high-quality touch points and outreaches. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you raise a good point, and I agree with what you're saying at about 80%. It'd be fun to get together sometime and go deeper on the 20%. So what I want to say is this. When I create the sales cadence and when I help a company have 13 touch points, quite frankly, they don't have to look up one thing on a person's LinkedIn profile for it to be wildly effective. They don't have to understand where the person went to school or, my gosh, you're an alumni where I'm an alumni and hey, let's have alumni good talk kind of thing. What really is underneath that, Mario, that I like to share with people is what I call the 4 pillars of buyer thought. And when we begin to understand the 4 pillars of buyer thought and integrate it in a hyper-personalized format, which includes a radical reduction in word count and subject lines and all sorts of things. We've got about 40 subject lines. But let me share this with you. Hear the way buyers think, especially executive buyers. They don't think in terms of product-centric language. Value proposition language even smells like sales stench. So they sort of run for the hills from that. But here's the way they think. The 4 pillars of buyer thought: topics, trends, metrics, and outcomes. And when we begin to appeal to the buyers the way they think, which is things that are topically relevant to them, when those topics are trending and we know they're trending relative to the function of that person that we're calling on, and we express that mathematically or metrics because smart people think quantitatively, ultimately that drives us to both conversation and dialogue and mental thought that's outcomes-based and not product benefit-based. We now are on track to incorporate hyper-personalized language that's tied to what I mentioned earlier, syntactical linguistics and hermeneutics, without having to spend 30 seconds on someone's LinkedIn profile. I know that'll challenge you a little bit from a construct that may be a new idea for you, but I'll bet you next time we see each other over a beer or something, we can have a really great dialogue about the impact of that.
Absolutely. I'd be very curious to see. But to your point on what executives care about is topics, trends, metrics, and outcomes. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I would agree. And even in our messaging templates, we very much are structured around a buyer outreach perspective. You've got to speak to the business pain and the business outcomes that they're facing and they're challenged with, which generally for your product and service or solution, it's going to be the same across buyers, specifically from the executive down into the individual contributor that's a buying influencer. Those are the problems that you're speaking to. And I think we forget about that a lot at sales community. But before you go into your fourth one, because you were going through all content is pre-scripted, you had data integrity, load balancing, all content pre-scripted. You had a fourth one that you wanted to mention before we got into the 6 levels of sales maturity. What I want to do is I want to get that fourth one, but I want everybody to listen into this very important message from our program sponsor. Opinions in sales are your worst enemy. Here's why. Your business has million-dollar questions that if you could answer with facts, you'd have an unfair advantage. Those questions are, what really separates your best reps from the rest? Why does half of your pipeline slip? And what's the best message to go to market with? If your answers were facts instead of opinions, you'd win the unfair share of your market. It turns out the truth is buried right underneath your nose. It's found in the customer conversations your team has every day. Introducing Gong.io. Gain powerful visibility into your customer conversations. With Gong, you'll win more deals, skyrocket rep success, and gain critical market intelligence that will help you achieve revenue success and win the lion's share of the wealth. Go to gong.io/demo to get started today. So tell me about the fourth element that you were going to mention in relation to data integrity, load balancing, and all content is pre-scripted.
And the fourth could be either fourth and fifth or fourth, depending on how we look at it, but it's really coaching and culture. That's kind of the next thing that's really the most important. I've learned that when it comes to coaching, first of all, there's so many things to say about coaching. First of all, it's widely neglected. And when it's really sales leadership's responsibility to ensure that coaching is happening regularly and consistently. While there are a lot of great tools out there that help us understand keywords that are working better than other keywords, and while I'm a believer in all of those, when it comes to true coaching and pulling out the best of the best of the best out of people, I still believe that is a human-to-human interaction for that to reach a place of selling efficacy and performance efficacy. And so I think when coaching is done consistently, when it's done human to human, when it's done in a spirit of positivity, someone once said critical thinking is a good thing, but a critical spirit is a terrible thing. And nobody wants to be that wants the dump truck unloaded on them of like a critical spirit. But when we critically work with people in a positive manner, help them simulate them with them like crazy, help them understand keywords, where words can be inserted in one place versus another, teach them how to kill the easy outs which they often make it easy for a prospect to say no and easily walk away. When we begin to help them understand that highly assumptive language is far more powerful, when they learn how to avoid politeness at the expense of persuasion, and when they learn how to be direct and really speak with people, power responds to power, and speak with people in a powerful tonality. And I don't mean rude at all, but this whole super politeness thing is so ineffective that we're seeing thousands of sellers do all across our great country. When people begin to be coached in the context of principles that are proven to persuade, again, it all goes back to what I mentioned earlier, in a way that's rooted in the science of language. When they begin to speak hermeneutically, when they really understand science of language and tonality, that coaching can boost performance to levels that senior leadership probably hasn't even begun to believe is possible to be attained.
I like that. So critical thinking, good. Critical spirit, bad.
That's right.
Yeah, makes sense.
I owe you $50. Last couple conferences I spoke at, we played a game called Holla for $50. And we put up good email, bad email, good script, bad script. I had some volunteers, and I said, you win. You just got $50 bill. So I owe you $50, Mario. Good work.
I love it. So those are the 4 things that you mentioned. How does that pertain to the 6 levels, though, that you were talking about?
So I'd like to expand a little bit more on the 4th one to talk about culture. Could I do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what I want to say about culture is we all know that awards are a great thing, right? We all know that a $50 gift card for everyone who did this or that, Amex gift card or Starbucks gift card, things like that. They're all good things. Immediate rewards are good things. We all know Sales Rep of the Year is a great thing. We all know that team outings are a great thing. I think that's fantastic, building a team mentality. But going way beyond that and creating what I call can help and need help analysis, where we begin to profile each other within the organization, where we know this person really shines very, very well with this particular task. This particular person needs help with that particular task. And when we start creating a culture where we are connecting people, and oftentimes it'll happen organically, but where we're deliberately connecting people, especially as companies and sales organizations grow, we begin connecting them amongst their peers, where one person has been identified as real strong skills and another person's identified needs a little help. When we start creating a culture that's what I call can help / need help driven, that takes the teamwork and et cetera to an entirely new level. So coaching and culture would be the other 2 things that I would comment on.
As we look at our teams and we assess our team, what is the chart, a grid that has the detailed criteria so that I can understand where my team is actually placed at on the scale that you just talked about?
Thank you for that. If you don't mind, I'll give a little shout out right now. I'll explain that to you, but your viewers can go to my website, one of 3 websites. It's all one string of text, thesalescadence.com.
Okay.
Thank you. If people Google me, they'll probably see Kraig Kleeman TV and kraigkleeman.com, but thesalescadence.com. So if your viewers go to that site, one of the top tabs says resources. To download an ebook called The Sales Maturity Model, which will lay the whole thing out for you. We talk about teams that are beginning, teams that are developing, teams that are emerging, teams that are accelerating, and finally, teams that are leading. And what we do is we build out an assessment tool so that sales leaders now can go in, read through the materials online, click through some of the questions. The platform will then, in effect, do an analysis and send right back to the viewer where their team is at on those levels and why. So it gives someone an ability to kind of benchmark their team against these best practices that I've described. Now, if you don't mind, I'm just going to say that that's simple, that's helpful. People's eyes are opened a lot when they read it, but nothing ever really compares for example, what I've done the last 2 weeks, I've been out in the Bay Area, with a company, firsthand examining every aspect of what their sales team does, every aspect of validating, stress testing their data, looking at the load balancing, looking at all the different things that we've been talking about, making recommendations to the CEO. And now we're moving ahead and beginning to execute on all those pre-developed content, all the things we've been talking about is something that we do with engagements. But back to your question, thesalescadence.com, and I'm not turning this into a commercial, I'm simply answering your question. Go to the resources tab. There's a variety of really great things that I'm really proud of. I've taken 12 years of my work, consolidated it down into easy to absorb intellectual property. And the ebook on the topic of the sales maturity model will really help you and others go deep as I've just described it.
And which phase do we want our sales team to be in? Obviously not the beginning. Developing, emerging, accelerating, or leading? Probably leading.
Well, leading is nirvana. Kurt Cobain, for example, I was in the Bay Area last week. I work with private equity guys, basically, and they buy companies and bring them to me, and that's kind of my world. So I'll probably do 3 more with this one particular group just in the next 2 quarters. The answer is the team that I just worked with were exactly where they ought to be, leading. They're new. There's no chief revenue officer. There's 2 inside salespeople. There's 2 pseudo SDRs. And there's a couple of pseudo validation people offshore. All that's got to be brought together, and step by step, we will lead that team from beginning all the way up to leading. But it's an iterative, step-by-step process. We just finished a workshop where we pre-created all the content. Now that's going to go out on a systematic 13-touch plan over a 30 to 45-day period. We'll split A/B test both of those. If you're Oracle, for example, if you're a very, very large organization with thousands of sellers and you're not leading, then your sales enablement people ought to probably get themselves acquainted with a model like this. But if you're a new startup company and you're basically somewhere between friends and family and Series A or maybe Series B, then you're probably not going to be at leading unless you happen to be one of the few that's on their way to unicorn status way faster than everyone else, because maybe you hit product market fit a little bit better than the next guy. Everybody's in a different space and place and needs to be shepherded along, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We only have a few more minutes here on this one, but what do you recommend for a leader to take away to help them mature their sales organization, whether it's beginning, developing, emerging, all the way to leading? What do you recommend that they do?
Well, the first thing I would recommend they do is, number one, and this is hard without someone to help you, is to understand the power of the written word and the power of the spoken word. And going back to one of my fundamental tenets, which is understanding and applying language in a way that is powerful. Understand also the way your buyers think so that now you're communicating to them the way they think topically, not necessarily because they went to Northwestern University, Kellogg School, and so did I. What we really want to do is we want to find out what is topically trending that we know is going to get their interest. For example, I worked with a team that sold really records management solutions to lots of different companies, but their primary target base was the health industry. And they would call on hospitals all the way down to small medical practices. When they would call them up using typical value proposition language, Mario, they call up the director of records management. They'd call up and say, "Oh, hi. Hello, this is Jane. Oh, hi, Jane. This is Kraig with ABC Company. How are you?" "I'm okay. How are you?" "Hey, I want to tell you that we are the leading provider of records management technology and assistance across all 50 states. We have warehouses and we have GPS tracked vans and we can destroy records when they need to be. We do this, we do this, we do that." When I witnessed 323 calls, they went 0 for 323. When they became acquainted with some of the concepts we're talking about, the way buyers think, I taught them how to call that same director of medical records and invite them to attend an analyst briefing where the topic was relevant to their professional mandate. So now, after they adopted this, the conversation was very different. Ring, ring, hello, this is Jane. Oh, hi, Jane. This is Kraig Kleeman with XYZ Company. Good morning. Good morning. Jane, I'm calling to schedule your 15-minute analyst briefing. I plan to accomplish this no later than Friday of next week. I have some availability on Tuesday in the morning or a little more availability on Thursday the 16th. Pretty much anytime after 10 a.m. What works best for you? Wait a minute. What is this all about? Jane, the topic is optimizing medical records to drive clinical and financial outcomes. And there might be a few other questions. Well, wait a minute. Well, tell me a little bit more about this. Well, Jane, our researchers have compiled information from a variety of analyst firms, and we're sharing the summary results with you. They went from 323 to like on a Monday morning at 8 a.m. by 12 noon, they could book their calendar for 2 weeks in just 4 hours. Why? Because they learned how to speak the way their buyers think. And they began to appeal to them on topics that are relevant to their professional mandate versus value proposition. We're the biggest, we're the baddest. And let me share with you how we saved Northwestern Memorial Hospital $1 million last year. They get 40 of those a day, right?
Yeah.
No matter how well we craft it up, we can't be part of that 40. We got to be very, very different.
Yeah. It's funny because we're in the middle of development of our sales pitch deck right now for our sellers. One of the challenges that I think we all like to talk about is how wonderful, how great we are, right? But the reality is you got to get back down into what's important to the buyer and what are the problems or challenges that they're trying to solve for, or things that create that natural curiosity. And you gave a really great example there. I love that example that you gave. Kraig, we're about out of time here right now. Well, here's what I want to do. If they want to connect with you, what's the best way? Is that through LinkedIn, Twitter? You tell me.
Yeah, the best way, bro, is to literally just send me an email at Kraig@kraigkleeman.com or Kraig@thesalescadence.com. My LinkedIn is Kraig Kleeman. That's good. But quite honestly, I'm sure like you, Mario, I get hundreds and hundreds of LinkedIn messages a day. They're almost impossible to keep up with. Kraig@kraigkleeman.com. All K's. I don't know why my mom did that to me. All K's. That would be the best way for someone to reach me.
Okay. We'll make sure we put that into the show notes as well. We'll also make sure we include the website information. Kraig, one final question for you. Inquiring minds want to know, all-time favorite movie. What is it?
So I got to tell you that could probably change depending upon the day for which you asked me. Okay. So with that disclaimer, a very close friend of mine is a consultant who I've known for a few years. He refers a lot of business, and I just saw him last week in the Bay Area. We both like rock music and stuff. And he goes, Kraig, you've got to watch this movie on Netflix called Echoes in the Canyon. And it's a movie about most of the big rock bands that emerged out of the 60s. But what's really awesome about it, Mario, is how much they all collaborated with each other. They shared insights. One person would really master one kind of subgenre of rock music. Another one might master another subgenre. Another one would be great at producing and mixing. It's funny, was rather than being kind of hurting, at least limiting goodness through some unhealthy spirit of competition, they rather had a super healthy spirit of collaboration, sharing insights. You could ask me tomorrow, it'll be different, but Echoes in the Canyon is spectacular.
There you have it. Echoes in the Canyon. We'll try to find that and put that into the show notes as well. Kraig, my man, it was great having you on the show. And for all of you listening in right now, make sure that you tune in to this message right now. Sales managers, before you go, does it feel like everything is a priority and everyone is asking for your time and attention? Here's a free video training that will help you manage your time, double your income, and will skyrocket your team's success. It's called the Sales Management Matrix. You'll learn exactly how to spend your time for the highest revenue return possible. Go to gong.io/matrix to get the free 19-minute video training. Again, that's gong.io/matrix. Go there now, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a rating and review on iTunes. I would appreciate it. Also, if you want to easily find our show, just go to themodernsellingpodcast.com. Hey, since you'll be on our site, be sure to check out our Modern Marketing Engine podcast hosted by my co-founder and CMO, Bernie Borges. Thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.